State of Play has some final thoughts on the state of the state this week, but in our State of Play way, we give you a twist.
And to give us that twist, we've invited John Stapleford of the Caesar Rodney Institute once again. John, thanks for joining us.
Well, no, let me make it clear. You're saying I'm twisted.
Yeah.
I have heard that before.
Maybe you have a twisted view. You're providing a twist on the numbers.
Okay, all right, yeah, good.
Where do the numbers?
Who writes this stuff?
Interesting is what you're providing to us. Interesting
okay,
numbers.
Okay.
Let's say. So where do things stand in Delaware as far as the last year and the year ahead?
Well, the bottom line is, and President Obama has the same problem, the governor cannot make a State of the State address based on measures of performance because the economy is still, pretty much in the emergency room. The performance of the public school system is still dropping. So when you look at the various things that are under the control of the state, there's not a whole lot of good news on the output side. Now he can talk about the input side, race to the top money and other inputs, but on the performance side, things are still dragging along.
We've got some other interesting numbers for you, to use the word interesting. We have unemployment down, but the number of hires are also down. Disposable income down. And, let's talk about the individual poverty rate, because unfortunately, that number is up.
Yeah, and there's a disconnect between the elites who are in politics and decision making and people with less education, particularly people with high school education or less. And if you have a college education, the unemployment rate right now in Delaware has been around 4% or 3%. If you have a high school education or less, you're talking about unemployment rates 15 to 20%. Plus, you're talking about more people who are working part-time who want to work full-time. You're talking about more people who have dropped out of the labor force. We have 15,000 people less in the labor force today than we did at the beginning of the recession. They just left, okay? We have 20,000 people, more people unemployed than we normally do in Delaware because of the unemployment rate being up at 7.6, 7.7. And we're also 30,000 jobs below where we were when the recession started. Most of that burden is being carried by people with less formal education.
Burden carried how? So they're just not working, or what?
Their income is down. They can't find jobs. A lot of the people who drop out of the labor force might be second wage earners, but that's the way they paid for baseball league for their children, or it allowed them to live above a poverty level lifestyle. I mean, they weren't living large, but it was tolerable. And so it's been a very difficult recession, and I don't think the structural shift that's going on, the shift towards demand for more formal education and lower wages for less education, I think that's permanent.
Staying on the education front, we had a race to the top story earlier in the show, and the number of 10th, 11th, 12th graders meeting math standards, reading standards is down as well. What do you think is behind that?
Overall, what parents in Delaware are saying is, and parents who have left Delaware, they're saying that the current mainstream public school model doesn't work. Over the last 8 years or so, the enrollment in charter school in Delaware is up 230%. A lot of that is minority kids. 58% of the kids in charter schools are minority because those families feel they've got to find a better way. 1 out of 5 children in Delaware is in private school. Newcastle County is 1 out of 4. I think that's the highest anywhere in the country. And then we lose about $3 billion of wages to people who work in Delaware but live outside of Delaware, and most of that I think is in southeast Pennsylvania. And most of those are people whose kids are going to Kennett Square School District or Union School District or Upland. So when you look at how people are voting with their feet, parents are voting with their feet, they're saying, pretty clearly, things have to change. And the obstacle to change is the union and the current Department of Education, who are entrenched. We have the highest, when you, outside of the individual schools, when you go to the overall Department of Education, we have the highest administrative overhead per pupil of any state in the country. You know, and this happens a lot of places, but things are not getting down to the classroom. And I know this is, people don't have the time to watch things, but there's a documentary called The Cartel, and my sense is all across the country, parents are starting to push back against what's happened, and the teachers themselves are not happy. Particularly, the main two reasons people go to charter schools is because of the behavioral environment and because of the values. And the education is third, okay? So they're not focused on the test scores. The teachers in the mainstream public schools have a terrible time with behavior, and they have very little means to crack down on behavior. So that's, to me, that's the major reason for the falling test scores. You have more and more kids right now in Delaware, 1 out of 2 births is out of wedlock. And the research literature is pretty clear on the average behavior of kids coming out of non-traditional households. They're more likely to drop out of school, and they're more likely to have psychological problems, and more likely to do drugs, more likely to be involved in crime, and so forth. Okay, I think teachers, I've seen it in some of the charter schools, I think they can help those kids if you turn the teachers loose. You know, if you let them use their years of experience and be creative. Under the union, that will not happen, because every teacher that leaves the mainstream public schools under the union, they lose the dues. So, and the dues are their political clout. Also, those jobs are their political clout too.
It's obviously a big issue, a big problem.
Huge. It's huge, Shirley. And you can understand, and if you've watched the movies, The Lottery, or the, what's it, The Return of Superman or something, and you see these families at the lotteries and the heartbreak that they're feeling. And in New York City, a woman who started one of the very successful charter schools in Harlem, she wanted to take a second building and open up more slots for kids. The union stopped her. It was an empty old school building. And you know, you think the union would say, well, that's great, you know, if these, what the kids really want. And I think it was Shanker, the head of one of the teachers union nationally, who said at one time, well, we'll care about the children when they pay dues. And I'm sure it was a throwaway line, but still there's some...
It resonates.
Yeah, and it's like any issue, sooner or later, if it gets bad enough, something has to be done, and people are going to react. And so I think that's one area where, and I don't feel the governor has the moxie to stand up to the teachers union.
Well, there's another huge issue, healthcare.
Yeah, the healthcare one, healthcare has been our growth industry for the last 5 years, and now Medicare, of course, is getting close to being tapped out. Medicaid in Delaware, it's the second largest item in the state budget now, behind public education, okay? $630-some million, went up $144 million between last fiscal year and this fiscal year. So they know they can't keep spending money the way they are. So they put together a cost containment commission for Medicaid, and their major recommendation was to tax drinks with sugar in it. Okay? Other states are doing very innovative things where you have defined benefit programs and you have co-pays that allow you not only to cover the people who are on Medicaid right now, but even extend into the working poor. If you look at the discretionary income of people, even people in poverty, they're spending $3,000 to $4,000 a year on eating out, on alcohol, tobacco, and so forth. And to say that they can't afford like a $25 copay, under the federal laws, you can only charge them a little less than $4 copay under Medicaid. The Joint Finance Committee of the state of Delaware wouldn't even allow the Department of Health and Social Services to do that. So you're right, in the area of health care, you know, the Medicaid is what covers people who are really really can't afford full health care coverage, but there's market-based solutions that work. And also, what the research literature shows is that when you just take care of somebody, okay, they feel more helpless, they feel more hopeless, they actually are a little more depressed. If you let them be part of the transaction, it gives them dignity and it gives them a say. You know? So, yes, the health, and because of Medicare and Medicaid being tapped out, healthcare is not going to be the growth industry in Delaware anymore. We do have a lot of seniors moving in, and so they'll be using Medicare, but other than that.
Always interesting information. John Stableford of the Caesar Rodney Institute, thank you for joining us on State of Play.